The wind
I
came
just
off the
remembered.
Nebraska
I
plain
know
like a
how
living thing,
the
dragging its
domino
fingers
started.
through the tall grass until the whole world whispered. And in the middle of that whisper, a woman stood alone on her porch, watching the sun bleed out across the horizon. Her name was Clara Whitmore, 32 years old, widow for 11 months, and the only sound in her house most nights was the creak of an empty rocking chair. She had buried Thomas in the frozen ground behind the barn last February. No preacher came. The snow was too deep, the roads too cruel. So she'd said the words herself, standing over a hole she'd dug with her own 2 hands, her breath rising in white clouds while the earth swallowed the only man who'd ever called her beautiful without laughing afterward. Now it was July. The wheat was coming in golden and heavy, bending under its own weight, and Clara needed to harvest 40 acres before the first frost turned it all to rot. 40 acres. One woman. 2 mules with a bad temper and a plow that hadn't been sharp since Thomas was alive. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped inside. The cabin was small. 1 room for sleeping, 1 for cooking, a lean-to for the animals. An oil lamp sat on the table unlit. She hadn't bothered lighting it in 3 days. What was the point of light when there was no one to see you by it? That was the night the stranger came. She heard the horse first. A slow, dragging walk like the animal was counting its last steps. Then the sound of a body hitting the dirt outside her gate. Not a fall, a collapse. The kind where a man's legs simply stopped believing in him. Clara reached for the shotgun above the door. Thomas had loaded it the morning before he died, and she hadn't touched it since. The metal was cold in her hands. She stepped onto the porch and raised the barrel toward the dark. A man lay face down in the dust beside her fence post. Broad shoulders. A long canvas duster coat torn at the shoulder and dark with something that wasn't mud. His hat was gone. His hair was the color of dried blood matted to his skull. 1 hand still gripped the reins of a roan mare that stood over him, breathing hard, ribs showing like the bars of a cage. "Hey," Clara called out. Her voice sounded strange to her. She hadn't spoken aloud in 2 days. "Hey, you alive?" The man's fingers twitched. He tried to push himself up, failed, tried again. His arm buckled and his face pressed back into the dirt. Clara lowered the shotgun. Not all the way, but enough. She walked down the porch steps, her boots crunching on the dry ground, and knelt beside him. Up close she could see the wound, a crease along his left side just below the ribs, old, maybe 2 days, infected. The skin around it was angry and swollen, weeping through the torn fabric of his shirt. "Help me," she whispered. She looked back at the cabin, at the dark windows, at the empty rocking chair she could see through the glass. Then she looked down at this stranger bleeding in her dirt. "You may call this home for now," she said. The words came out flat, practical, like she was offering a room at a boarding house instead of pulling a dying man out of the earth. He lifted his head. Just barely. His eyes were the pale gray of winter rivers, and they found hers with a focus that surprised her. A man that sick shouldn't have been able to look at anything with that much steadiness. He smiled. Cracked lips, blood on his teeth, but a real smile. "What if I call it home forever?" he said. His voice was gravel and smoke, barely above a whisper. Clara stared at him. Then she grabbed him under the arms and dragged him inside. His name was Elias Vane. He told her that the first night, while she cleaned the wound with boiled water and a strip of clean linen, and he bit down on a leather belt to keep from screaming. He told her he'd been a cattle driver out of Dodge, that he'd had a disagreement with a man named Harlan Griggs over a debt that wasn't his, that the disagreement had ended with a bullet and 3 days of riding with no doctor, no rest, and a horse that was dying under him. "You stole that horse?" Clara asked, wringing blood from the cloth into a tin basin. "Borrowed," Elias said through the belt. "From a man who owed me 6 months' wages." Clara almost smiled. Almost. For 3 days he couldn't stand. She fed him broth, changed his bandages, kept the shotgun within arm's reach while she slept in the chair by the fire. He watched her from the cot Thomas had built, and she watched him back, and neither of them said much. Silence, Clara had learned, was the only honest language left. On the 4th day, he sat up. On the 5th, he walked to the door and stood in the sunlight like a man seeing the world for the first time. On the 6th, he found the plow in the barn and began sharpening the blade with a whetstone, the rhythmic scrape of metal on stone filling the morning air. Clara watched from the porch, arms crossed. "You don't owe me labor," she said. "No," he agreed. He didn't stop sharpening. But I owe the land something. It let me sleep in it for 3 nights without killing me." She almost laughed. The sound surprised her when it came, small, rusty, like a gate that hadn't been opened in a year. The weeks turned. Elias fixed the fence on the south quarter, mended the barn roof where the spring storms had torn the shingles loose. He worked the mules without fuss, and the mules, who had hated every living soul since Thomas died, seemed to decide he was acceptable. Clara harvested the wheat while he hauled it to the thrashing floor. They ate together at the small table. He cooked on the nights she was too tired to stand. She cooked on the nights his sides still ached and his hands shook. They did not talk about the future. They did not talk about Harlan Griggs. They did not talk about Thomas except once, when Elias found the wedding ring on the mantel and set it back down without a word, and Clara saw him do it, and something in her chest loosened by a single careful degree. The town was called Millbrook, 12 miles east. A general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple, and a sheriff named Dale Prout who had been trying to buy Clara's land since the week after the funeral. He came on a Tuesday in August, rode up on a fat bay horse with 2 men behind him. Clara was in the field. Elias was mending a harness in the barn. Prout didn't dismount. He sat his horse at the edge of the property and called out to her like she was a dog that had wandered too far from its yard. "Clara, still at it, I see, still playing farmer." She straightened, wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. "Sheriff Prout, you're on my land." "Your land." He said it like a joke. Like the words themselves were funny. "Your husband's land, you mean, and your husband's been in the ground 11 months. You got no deed in your name. Thomas never filed the transfer at the county office. You know that." Clara knew that. She'd known it since the day after the burial. Knew it every night when she lay awake listening to the wind. Knew it every time Prout's men rode past her fence and slowed down just enough to let her see them looking. "File it," she said. "File it," Prout repeated. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You got until the 1st of September, Clara. After that, this land reverts to the county, and the county sells it to me." He turned his horse, rode off. His 2 men followed, and one of them looked back at the barn where Elias stood in the doorway watching. That night, Clara sat at the table with the oil lamp lit for the first time in weeks. The flame threw long shadows across the walls. Elias sat across from her, a cup of coffee going cold in his hands. "He'll take it," Clara said, quiet, not asking. "If you file the deed." "I can't. The county office is in Harlan, 40 miles, and I'd need a witness, someone who knew Thomas. Someone who saw us married." She paused. "Everyone who knew him is dead or gone." Elias was quiet for a long time. The lamp ticked. Outside, the mules shifted in the barn. "Go," he said. Clara looked up. "You'll go where?" "To Harlan, to the county office. I'll ride out tomorrow, file what needs filing, and be back before the week's out." "You can't. Prout's men watch the road, and if Griggs has riders out looking for you, then I'll take the creek bed, the long way." He set his cup down. "You took me in, Clara. You pulled me out of the dirt when you had every reason to put a bullet in me and go back to bed. I'm not letting some fat little sheriff steal your life because of a missing piece of paper." She wanted to argue. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Why?" she asked. And the word came out smaller than she meant it to. Smaller and more honest than anything she'd said in 11 months. Elias looked at her, really looked, not at the widow, not at the farmer, at her. "Because you said I could call this home," he said. "And I meant what I said that first night. I meant it then and I mean it now." Silence between them was not empty. It was full. Full of the wheat they'd harvested together. Full of the mules he'd calmed and the roof he'd mended and the nights he'd cooked when her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Full of the small, careful trust that had grown between 2 broken people like grass through a crack in stone. Clara reached across the table, took his hand, held it. He left at dawn, took the roan who had healed alongside him, rode south along the creek bed, hidden by the cottonwoods, and Clara stood on the porch and watched until the dust swallowed him whole. He was gone 4 days. 4 days of silence. 4 days of Clara checking the road every hour. 4 nights of sleeping with the shotgun across her lap and the oil lamp burning until the oil ran dry. On the 3rd night, Prout came back. Brought 4 men this time. Stood at the fence line with a lantern and a smile and told her the deadline had moved up. September 1st was now August 28th. 2 days. "Alone out here, Clara," he said. "A woman alone is a woman without protection. You know how the territory works." "I know how it works," she said, and she raised the shotgun. And for the first time in her life she meant to use it. Prue's smile faltered, just a fraction. He tipped his hat and rode off, but Clara saw the look he gave his men. The look that said he'd be back. And next time he wouldn't be asking. The fourth morning the sun was barely up when Clara heard the horse. The roan, coming fast, coming hard, and on its back a man with a canvas duster and a piece of paper folded in his breast pocket. Elias swung down from the saddle before the horse fully stopped. He was bleeding again, a fresh cut across his forehead. His left hand hung wrong, fingers swollen. He'd been in a fight, maybe more than one. He walked up the porch steps, pulled the paper from his coat, unfolded it, set it on the railing between them, the county seal. Thomas Whitmore's name, Clara Whitmore's name, filed, witnessed, legal. "Prue's men caught me outside Harlan," Elias said. He was breathing hard. Blood ran down his temple and dripped onto the porch boards. Took some convincing to get past them, but the clerk had already stamped it, already filed it. He tapped the paper. "This land is yours, Clara, free and clear. No man can take it." Clara stared at the paper, then at him, at the blood, at the broken hand, at the 4 days of riding and fighting written in every line of his face. "An idiot," she said. Her voice broke on the second word. "Probably," he agreed. She stepped forward, put her hands on his face, gently, like he was something that might shatter, like he was something worth holding. "You said you call it home forever," she whispered. "I did." "Then stop bleeding on my porch and come inside." He smiled. That same cracked, bloody smile from the first night. The one that had no business being so steady in a face so broken. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Prue came back on the 28th. Found the deed posted on the cabin door. Found Clara Whitmore standing on her land with a shotgun and a man beside her who looked like he'd walked through hell and was perfectly willing to walk through it again. Prue looked at the paper, looked at Elias, looked at the shotgun, turned his horse around, did not come back. The wheat was in. The barn was mended. The mules had names now, which Elias insisted on and Clara pretended to hate. The rocking chair on the porch no longer creaked empty. It creaked with the weight of a man reading aloud from a newspaper while a woman mended a shirt beside him, their shoulders touching, the sun going down slow and golden over 40 acres that belonged to no one but them. And some nights when the wind came off the plain and the tall grass whispered like the whole world was breathing, Clara would look at the man across the table and remember the night he'd collapsed in her dirt, bleeding, dying, smiling, and she would think, the frontier takes everything from you. Your husband, your peace, your certainty that tomorrow will look like today. But sometimes if you are brave enough to open the door, it gives something back, not what you lost, never that, but something new. Something with rough hands and a crooked smile and a stubborn, foolish heart that rode 40 miles through creek beds and fistfights just to bring a woman a piece of paper that said, "This is yours. You are not alone. You were never meant to be." The lamp burned low. The prairie stretched on, endless and indifferent and beautiful. And in a small cabin 12 miles from Millbrook, two people who had every reason to trust no one sat together in the warm, quiet dark and called it home. Not for now, forever.